What's up, nerds? Zach the Goblin here. Looking at my calendar, it looks like we're due for your next dose of 40k Primarch slop content. And this time, I'm revisiting my ranking every Warhammer 40k Primarch on the Autism spectrum video. In this video, I'm going to be addressing some comments and potentially adjusting some of my rankings accordingly. And yes, don't worry, I will be talking about Perturabo. Just like last time, I have a quick disclaimer. I am not a doctor and I am not literally diagnosing any of these fictional characters, nor am I being disparaging to actual autistic people. Everything I say is for jokes and should not be taken seriously. Oh, also real quick, as I am writing this, there are over 300 comments on the video, so if I missed some argument that was super profound, I apologize. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content. Now with that out of the way, it's Goblin time. So here was the final Autism spectrum ranking we ended up with last time. If you want my reasoning behind why I put each Primarch where they are, check out the first video. I'm going to be picking out the Primarchs that I feel were talked about the most. Let's start with an easy one, Ferrus Manus. So originally, I didn't rank him because I honestly didn't feel like I knew enough about him to fairly place him anywhere. I haven't read his Primarch book yet. But fortunately, people in the comments of the last video illuminated me. This was said by a couple comments, but here's one example. I'm gonna quote Papag8 here, since I feel they lay it out pretty well. Ferrus Manus translates to Iron Hand. Ferrus Manus has an Iron Hand. His legion is named Iron Hands. His flagship is named Fist of Iron. The chapter badge is an Iron Hand. So yeah, there could be something of a special interest there. Now my only question is, did he personally name all of this stuff, or did the Legion name them because they revere their Primarch so much? Because if it's the latter, then I don't think it affects his ranking all that much. But the comments definitely attribute it to him, and when have YouTube comments ever steered anyone wrong? Also, this guy says 100% objective truth, so who am I to argue with that? So my knowledge on Ferrus Manus is still limited, but the comments have convinced me that he deserves to be on this list. I still don't feel confident enough to put him up with the heavy autistic hitters, as it were, but I see a good opportunity to correct something that I wasn't brave enough to do in the original video. Now, if you recall, the only reason I put Robot Gorilla Man where I did is because I felt like I was going to be crucified if I put him where I feel like he actually belongs. I know, big coward move on my part. So Bobby G's old spot has now been taken over by Ferrus Manus, and then I'll move G-Dog down where he should have been originally, in my very humble opinion, which is 100% factual. So now we have a Primarch that I just don't agree with the commenters on, Mortarion. I didn't really see any arguments that were super convincing for me, but there is one argument I saw a couple of people bring up that I do want to talk about because I think it's actually pretty interesting. Mortarion and the number 7. To summarize, it's that Mortarion has this superstition when it comes to the number 7. Some examples being like his guard not being allowed further than 49 paces from him, 7 times 7. He made his gates 7 centimeters taller than the Eternity Gate on Terra, and more instances like that. But hear me out. I don't think that makes him autistic. And don't worry, I'm gonna break down why. So for background, 7 is one of Nurgle's holy numbers. I think Mortarion's fascination with 7 is just the author's foreshadowing what is about to come. I think it's supposed to be seen more as a literary device than an actual comment on his personality or anything like that. It's to symbolize that Nurgle kind of has dibs on him. Also, and I want to note, I could be misremembering this part, but I believe it's implied that Morty is doing it subconsciously, so I feel like that further supports that it's just the warp influencing him to fall to Nurgle. But regardless of if it's just a literary device or if he's doing it on purpose even, I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of my argument. Because regardless, if anything, the obsession with 7 could be seen more as superstition, or at worst, OCD, neither of which are autism. So I feel like the 7 thing doesn't really prove anything, in my eyes at least. But I am fair and somewhat of a people pleaser, so I will acquiesce and move him. And there we are. Okay, so now we can move on to the one I saw the most disagreement with. Oh boy, were there a lot of people that didn't agree with my placement of Perturabo. And there were actually some reasonable arguments here. Even though I do think some of his actions could be potentially attributed to daddy issues and deep-seated insecurities more so than autism. Again, I said potentially. But regardless of all of that, I do actually agree I have him in the wrong spot. This pains me to admit it, but this one is kind of on me, because I should have been a lot more heavy-handed with the joke, but me placing him here was supposed to be kind of like a meta dig at the fact that he always comes second to Rogel Dorn, even when it comes to an autism ranking, which very few people did get. But it's time to own up to my shortcomings. I did a bad job of making it obvious that I was making them, that joke, so I'm gonna fix my mistake and put him up here where he belongs. With that being said, and this is going to be a point of contention, I still think he falls below the top spot. I am 100% right when it comes to Lionel Johnson, and I will die before I am ever convinced otherwise. But let me talk my shit real quick and justify it. So essentially, I think that Lionel Johnson is the only Primarch that was actually purposely written to be autistic. And all my thoughts on that could probably go into its own video, but for this, I'm going to keep it brief. In the last video, I gave examples on how the Lion has a hard time connecting with the people around him, and he has an especially hard time reading people, and he can't really tell if people are lying to him or not. And I'm going to go off on a little tangent here that I think will ultimately explain why I think the Lion is different than the other Primarchs. A lot of arguments that I saw were people saying that Primarch A or Primarch B deserved to be higher because they were stubborn or abrasive or something like that. Something generally along those lines. And my thoughts are, you can be stubborn or abrasive and not be autistic. And on the flip side, you can be autistic and not be stubborn or abrasive. I think ultimately it comes down to not how you act, but why you act that way. So I'm actually going to use Perturabo as an example. So this was something that was brought up in the comments, but I think it shows the subtle difference that helps prove my point. So in the Magnus Primarch book, Magnus tasks Perturabo with building this device, with Perturabo sussing out the fact that it has to do with the warp. Long story short, Perturabo destroys the device in front of Magnus to prove a point, to try and push Magnus away from looking too deeply into the warp because it's dangerous. With Magnus being understandably upset, calling Perturabo cruel because he could have destroyed it at any time. Why did he wait until he was in front of Magnus to do it? With Perturabo being like, no, I had to do it in front of you. Sometimes cruelty is the only way to make a point so clearly that nobody can ever mistake its intent. Which, you know, in the comments, some people are like, oh, see, he's being a dick. He's being abrasive. He's being a little bit too much autistic. But again, see my previous point, being a dick doesn't make you autistic. Because ultimately, Perturabo knew what he was doing. He was being a dick to prove a point. He never had any misunderstandings on how Magnus would react to that. Now, was Perturabo being an asshole in this situation? Yeah, of course. But again, he was doing it intentionally. Nowhere was he misreading the situation or misreading the social consequences of what he was doing. Now let's contrast that with the Lion to help solidify my point. The Lion also is very blunt and direct. He frequently says things very matter-of-factly. And a lot of the people around him also see him as kind of abrasive at times. But here's the difference here. The Lion, for the most part, isn't trying to be an asshole. He's just saying things how he sees them, and the unintended consequence is it upsets other people. The Lion is different because a lot of the other Primarchs, they realize they're being dicks. They're being abrasive on purpose. Or they just don't care, but they still know that that is how they are going to be received. They understand that. There's no misunderstanding of social cues. They just purposely don't care. Like with Perturabo breaking Magnus's device. He knew he was being a dick. It was on purpose. The Lion, on the other hand, frequently seems surprised that what he's saying is upsetting someone. Because in his mind, it's more like, well, why would this upset someone? It's just fact. Again, the Lion just says things a lot, not understanding that they could or would upset someone. It's not on purpose, it's just an unintended consequence, which again is the main thing of why I think it's different, which sets him beyond the other Primarchs. When it comes to autism, I think the Lion is a more realistic depiction without straying into being a caricature. He has issues with these things that the other Primarchs don't really seem to have. This struggle reading people, in my eyes, was one of the big reasons for Luther's and the Fallen's ultimate betrayal. I mean, hell, his fight against his brother Leman Russ could have been avoided if he could just read the room a little bit better. But again, for all of the Lion's realistic flaws, he is still extremely competent. Again, I could make a whole video just on this topic alone. But for brevity, just to summarize, where a lot of the other Primarchs, quote unquote, autistic traits end up being kind of caricatures, the Lion is a little more grounded. So to me, it seems more purposeful, if that makes sense. Okay, so to wrap everything up, as much as I joke about me being 100% right all the time, of course you're free to disagree with me, because the Primarchs are ultimately like my dad in that they don't exist. But here's my updated Primarch autism spectrum list. So ultimately, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm always welcome to hear differing opinions, and who knows, you might even change my mind. If you want to see me do any other weird subjective rankings, let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video and listening to me yap about this. I really appreciate it. And until next time, Goblin out.